The only other thing I had here was the Dolphins. I thought the Dolphins missed a golden opportunity to kind of right the ship. You lose to the Cardinals, right? You're 2-5 now. Right?
2-6.
2-6 now.
Oh,
Jets.
Actually, I lied. 2-5 because they had their bye week. Good stuff.
2-5. So the Dolphins, they have a couple like cupcake. They have the Jets 2 times. They have the Patriots. They have a couple games, but still on their schedule, they have the Bills, the Rams, Packers, Texans, and 49ers, as well as the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland on December 29th. That's 6 games. You can't afford to lose 3 of those games, and then you got to win all of the gimmies. So I think this was just a really tough game to lose because we all picked the Dolphins. Of course, with Tua back, I thought it was going to be kind of, I shouldn't say easy. Nothing's easy in the NFL, but I thought it was the game that they would be able to have. But Kyler Murray in that second half, they really came alive. They had a comeback win. Marvin Harrison had a breakout game. We mentioned it, Trey McBride, James Conner. But that was the only other takeaway I had than the Eagles and Cardinals stuff we talked about.
So I had a question that coincides with the Miami Dolphins. My question is real simple. You know, they paid Tua last summer, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So I am not tweaking. You paid Tua. Tyreek is 30 or over. He might be 30 or 31. Jalen Waddle's still young. Jalen Ramsey's getting up there in age. What's your direction going into next season? You're probably not going to make the playoffs this year. Let's just call it how we see it. Your defense is probably shit bad, like really bad. Tua is not I don't want to disrespect him and say he's not an elevator, but he's just not the top guys like Allen, Lamar.
He is an elevator.
Well, he's not them, is what I'm saying.
I know what you mean.
He's not them guys. So you kind of have a good quarterback, not a great. Your defense is dog shit. Your offense is Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane, but your offensive line is. So my question is, how do you build up this Miami Dolphins roster? How do you get it to where it can be competitive, it can compete with the top echelon teams, or even just get consistently to the playoffs? Because they haven't been able to do that. They've made one playoff game in 3. They played one playoff game in 3 years. Two.
Yeah, they had the Skylar Thompson.
Oh, right. 2
last
playoff
year's
games
game.
in 3 years. So you had an opportunity before, but then you folded at the end of the year. So my question for Miami is just, where do you go from here? Like, what do you do next offseason? You're probably going to be strapped with some cash. You're probably not going to have a ton of money. Your defense really has holes that needs fixing. You thought you did that last offseason when you brought in a couple guys. You didn't do that. And then your guys this year are banged up. Well, they weren't coming in. They were banged up. And Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, if I'm not mistaken. So what's Miami's next goal? It's a question for you guys. Like, what's Miami's mission? Do you just call it a day, start the tanking process, or do you? Because this hasn't been a consistent winning thing. I mean, you've had moments in the regular season for sure. You've had great moments in the regular season, but it hasn't led to that consistency that you want to see in the playoffs. You know, come December and January and all that, it hasn't led to that. So when do you start to hit the reset button, or do you continue on to this path?
Let me show some love to my dad because he put this idea in my head and it's a fair one. You're 2-4 right, 2-4 right now. Excuse me, 2-5. I apologize. 2-5 right now. You play the Buffalo Bills coming into this week. You go 2-6 in
play Buffalo this week?
I believe so. Yes.
They do play the
Yes.
Bills.
In Buffalo?
In Buffalo, yes.
Woo!
Now
2-6.
I agree. And now that's the thing. I'm going into that with the idea of Miami most likely loses
They need to
this
win that
game.
one.
Do you go the smart route? This season's done.
Yes, you should.
You sit Tua, protect him rest of the year, and then do your best to now have a high draft pick to go and either one, draft the best player available, go and help out this defense, go out and get an offensive lineman, or use this pick as leverage, go and get more assets to really try and build a more cohesive
Travis
roster.
Hunter's a Miami Dolphin.
I don't think they're going to have the number 1 pick. No.
Okay.
But
Will Johnson.
Along those lines, you lose against the Bills, in everyone's estimation, the season's over. You needed this game versus the Arizona Cardinals. I know there's a lot of games left, but the games at the end of the schedule aren't easy either. You have the Green Bay Packers. You have the Texans. Listen, with the way that the Browns play with Jameis Winston, that's now not an easy game, funny enough. There's difficult games at the end of the schedule. You play the Jets also week 18. You play them twice also down the stretch. I think that you're looking at that one like, hey, this might be our easiest game. But regardless of that fact, I agree with you. I don't think that this team is ready right now. The defense has too many holes, especially the rush defense is not that great. And now once Tua comes back onto the field, their saving grace has been this pass defense, and now their pass defense is getting torched for the first time since week 2 that Arizona has showed us any type of life.
The defense was always a little
fluky, fair enough, and I don't disagree. But my point being is, You mentioned the Dolphins blew an opportunity. I agree. I think the Dolphins got complacent, thought they had this one in the bag, and then they started getting careless. You mentioned it when we spoke before. Tua has the miss snap that gets launched over his head, and him trying to be safe, not go and pick it up. Makes sense. I'm not trying to pick this up because now people are jumping on me. I have a chance to get injured again. It's going to be a safety regardless. I booted out of the end zone. They get 2 points. Now my defense just has to hold like it did in the first half. Defense doesn't hold. They end up scoring a touchdown, go for 2. They don't end up getting it. Then Dolphins end up scoring. Chargers answer right back.
Cardinals.
Thank you. Excuse me. Cardinals answer right back. You have an 8-play drive that leads to 0 points, and you end up getting off the field. And now you have 4 minutes to get a stop on the Cardinals, and you can't do that. You can't get off the field. They end up kicking a game-winning field goal. They got complacent. They went into cruise control, and you can't do that when you're a 2-4 and that's what inevitably happens. So I think that it's fair to have those takeaways. And I think that after this Bills game, we'll start to see a lot of moves put into place. Or at least I'd hope so, trying to plan for the future. But agreed, another year older of Tyreek Hill, another year of Raheem Mostert. He's most likely not going to be on the same player next season. But there's positives. Achane looks awesome.
Achane is OD.
You know, the pass defense has been pretty great up until this point of the season. There's certain takeaways to have. Tua's back. That's obviously huge. You weren't anticipating that. So it's tough sledding for the Dolphins right now.
I think you need a bit of a rebuild. Like, obviously, with this team, you're never going to go into full rebuild and win like 3 games. You're just going to be too talented to do that. But you need to, for some of these veterans, Calais Campbell, for example, like, I think there's some guys that you sign like these 1-year deals or extended guys that maybe are a bit past their prime that you should try to find replacements for if possible. Again, like, there's some contracts, like you just signed Jalen Ramsey, you're not going to have that. Tyreek Hill, not that you're trying to by any means. But also just like kind of big picture view for the Dolphins. Do we think they're like really built to win playoff games? Like, outside of having the number 1 seed, are they built to go into Baltimore? Are they built to go into Buffalo or Kansas City and win games? Like, you guys know how much I love offense and Mike McDaniel and what he does in terms of creating space and easy reads for this offense and chunk plays, and all of that is great for the regular season. But once you get into the playoffs and you see fucking Derrick Henry is able to carry, you see Josh Allen being 6'5", being able to be Superman, Patrick Mahomes doing the shit he does, that's when I just really question kind of the not the mindset, but just like the identity of the Dolphins, which is like, we're going to be a team that can score 30 points with speed and with offense and all of these things that work great in September and October. But we've seen for these last few seasons, once it's December and January, that shit really doesn't fly, especially when you're going up against top defenses. So I think it has to be a bit of just a different identity for the Dolphins. I think they just have to get a bit tougher on both sides of the ball, offensive line and defensive line. You got to be able to consistently run the ball. But more than anything, you have to be able to win in other ways other than just being, we're going to be more creative than everybody, because eventually you're just going to run into teams that are better than you and tougher than you in those really tough situations in the playoffs.
They're a finesse team. They got to get better on the offensive defensive line. That's number 1. You just got to draft well. Like, every quarterback that has gotten paid, the number 1 way that those teams are building their teams is they are offloading veteran players and they're drafting well. Like the Bills, you know, you trade Stephon Diggs, you draft Keon Coleman, and that's how they have to build this roster up. The problem that the Dolphins are going to run into is that they paid a guy that is just not on those other quarterbacks level. And you talk about being an elevator. I think Tua, if we're in a 10-story building and we have an elevator, I think he gets us to the 7th floor. And if we try to get to the 8th floor, you know, maybe we're at 7.5, but it kind of stops and jams up right there. That's what I feel like it is. And yeah, the offense hasn't looked good at all when he hasn't been there. But what have been the games that Tua has played this year? The Jaguars, one of the worst teams in NFL hindsight, barely beat them. The Bills, terrible against them. The Cardinals, offense played well, but situationally down the stretch, they couldn't win that game. Like, the Dolphins are just a mediocre football team. Like, it is what it is.
The Dolphins had 3 drives where they didn't score. 1 punt, 1 botch snap, and another punt in the second half. At a point where the defense had been amazing while Tua's been gone, everything's all optimistic.
That screen pass, though.
One play.
Dude, it's a screen pass.
It's one play. I can't look at that and really highlight the whole game.
I'm not looking at it and saying it's his fault, but in those moments, you gotta make that play. And then the underthrow to Tyreek Hill is pretty egregious.
Yeah, but he was already like like it's 50, 60 yards down the field.
He underthrew him by like 20
A lot.
yards.
20 yards is a stretch.
It was a lot.
Numbers aren't that
It
hard.
was a
lot,
lot.
though. I agree. But he's also throwing off his back foot. I don't know why he did that.
It was a potential
bad-
touchdown.
I mean, there were still 2 defenders there, but regardless, he underthrew him a lot. I think he kind of saw him late too and just kind of let it rip. I thought that he threw off his back foot. One, you don't have the arm for that, buddy. Go ahead and get some base under you, get some motion going. But it was a tough one, and I think he just saw the play too late. But other than that, he had some really great throws, really great decisions. Defense let him down. And I feel like I find myself saying that often, but in this situation, you have 3 drives where you don't put points on the board and you lose the game. To me, I feel like that's not on you.